Mhm. Hey gang, Wes Buck here, Drag Illustrated Magazine. It is Wednesday, December 16th, 2020. I hope you are doing extremely well. What's going on, Ryan? What's going on, Chris? Justin, what's happening, guys? Please, if you don't mind, take a second, click like, click share, spread this message around. Let's talk a little bit of drag racing. Snowing in Pennsylvania, man. I am not at all ready for that. Snowing in Pennsylvania, we're lucky. It's cold. It's chilly down here in Texas, but it is fortunately not snowing. Let me see. I'm gonna try to show these. What's going on, Brandon, Roy? What's happening? Please, guys. Selena, what's up? Coolest nerd, America's coolest nerd. Thanks, Captain Lucky. I don't know if that's aimed at me. What's up, Puerto Rico in the house? Again, if you guys don't mind, click like, click share. I'm gonna do the exact same thing myself here, real quick. 2 seconds. Pa 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 pa. Maybe. Let me see. See, not only do I ask you guys to share, I join in and I share myself. That what more can you ask for? That seems like a big deal. What's going on, Tim? What's going on, Brandon? Algona, Washington. Fantastic. Let's talk drag racing. Shall we? Shall we? Boom. All right, guys. Well, obviously, as you likely know, unless you've been living under a rock, there was major NHRA door slammer drag racing news last week when the NHRA announced that they would be instituting a mandatory manual shifting rule for Pro Mod drag racing, the E3 Spark Plugs NHRA Pro Mod drag racing series presented by J&A Service. This has been a huge, huge deal, and I'm dying to hear what all of you have to say about this. So please, right now, share your thoughts in the comments. I want to know how my fellow racing family feels about this stuff, because for me, this is a big, big, big happening. I don't think any, but I personally, I was taken by the timing of this, right? Because I look back on, there's a lot to unpack with this. So I guess first and foremost, we should break down the news. I did hear some rumblings of something crazy like this happening back in October at the NHRA National event, the season-ending NHRA National event in Las Vegas. I had heard some rumblings, or that there was some talk, or this. It seemed like a pipe dream to me. It seemed like something that we would talk about, but would never actually happen. Here I am last week scrolling through whatever the news. I get a couple of texts. Did you see this? Did you see this? Do you see this? Dive in a little bit, and it like a ton of bricks, like a punch to the stomach. Oh my goodness, the NA has made it manual shifting for Pro Mods in 2021. So we're starting to get some commentary here. Robert Marble saying could be fun to the driver back in charge. There's a big wide-ranging thoughts on this, which has made it so interesting. I think that's why it's so much fun to talk about, to be totally honest, because there are a lot of people that have extremely opposing opinions on this. So let's just, again, start at the top. For as long, it's been about a decade, I believe, thereabouts, about a decade since the NHRA has allowed in automatic shifters. And if you remember, this was actually a pretty controversial deal when it happened, because a lot of the Pro Mod drivers really took pride in the fact that they could drive the car with one hand on the wheel. They had their hand on an air tower, and they were shifting the car themselves. There was a few drivers that were struggling with it, and this was kind of like, this is inside baseball. You had to kind of be on the inside about things. The real issue was for a lot of the nitrous cars, because still today these things are in low gear a very short amount of time, like 9/10 of a second, 1 second. So back then, you had Mike Castellana, Shannon Jenkins, Bert Nogzier, a slew of others, Khaled Al-Belushi. There was a lot of pretty competitive nitrous cars in the quarter-mile world, and these automatic shifters were being used, and they were allowed in around that time. I think it was between 2008 and 2010, thereabouts, right? Right along the same time that R2B2 and ProCare RX was the title rights sponsor of the NHRA Pro Mod Drag Racing Series. So anyways, it was crazy to see how allowing the automatic shifters in changed the dynamic of the class. Immediately, you start to see way more consistent runs. You start to see guys that'll be having success that, and this is, I don't mean to talk out of turn here, but we started to see guys that struggled consistently start to have some success. You saw a program start to really, really, really rapidly accelerate because that was now a controlled variable, whereas in the past it hadn't been a controlled variable, and you had guys over revving stuff, shifting early, driving through the clutch, a multitude of different things happening with the turbo car. Well, there wasn't really hardly anybody except for I guess Brad Personette and Steve Matusik that were trying the clutch turbo thing. But anyways, I mean, in those cars, if you short shift one of those turbo cars and it pulls the motor way down, it makes more power. It just loads the motor more, makes more power, and you've got a bigger problem than you had before when you were trying to save the tire. So anyways, this has been a very nuanced deal for a really long time, and I honestly thought the ship had sailed. Personally, never, ever, ever did I think that manually shifting these cars would return to the table, would come back, would even be considered. And this is something that I have historically had a pretty strong opinion on, and this isn't something that I've talked about out in the open that much, but I will admit that I've had a fair number of conversations about this around a campfire, at the racetrack, or at a hotel bar, or at a dinner at a restaurant. These are things that get talked about behind the scenes. And one of the things that I always talked about, in my opinion, and this is I don't know that it's a perfect analogy or metaphor, but it's close. So bear with me while I dive into this. I've always said that with like NBA basketball, I should not be able to buy a pair of tennis shoes that would allow me to compete on a level playing field with LeBron James. He's bigger than I am, he's taller than I am, he has more experience than I do, he's stronger than I am, he has a natural talent for basketball, he has an incredible leaping ability. I should not be able to buy some device that allows him and I to compete at the same level. In my opinion, that is some of what the technology that has crept into door slammer drag racing, pro modified specifically, has allowed to happen. Now, is it an apples to apples comparison? Not necessarily, right? But I really truly believe that Vinny Badano's son, is in here right now. My personal opinion is that it should be hard, right? Driving one of these cars should be something that not everyone can do. And if you are no longer able to do it by age or whatever else, that stinks, and you hate to lose that car, that competitor, but I don't know that that's all bad, right? Because personally, I'm a big believer that anything that thrusts more onus on the driver for the success or failure of a race car, the better. Anything we can do. Matter of fact, the reason that I'm so passionate about pro stock racing is because the driver can make all the difference, and typically does make all the difference. All those cars are so close. All those cars are so equally prepared, right? And there's obviously differences between them, and there's some nuances and whatever, and there are obviously teams that have a little bit better power or have a little bit better handle on the car or the clutch, whatever. But if you table those issues, most of those runs are made or lost by the driver. If they're a little early, a little late, hit the rev limiter, all these things, it directly impacts whether or not they're going to turn a wing light on, set a record, whether they're going to qualify 16th or they're going to qualify 6th or they're going to qualify 1st, right? So I don't know that this is a bad thing. I think by and large, it's a good thing. I do understand some of the concerns that exist out there. I want to backtrack just slightly and speak to the fact that the NHRA, by all accounts, everyone that I've talked to, and I will hold my hand up and admit that I have not spoken to anyone at the NHRA's technical department. We have made a couple of reach outs, not myself personally, but other members of our editorial staff here at Drag Illustrated have made a couple of reach outs, but I haven't personally investigated that too heavily. However, we have talked to a ton of racers, and the thing that I've heard consistently is that the NHRA has pointed to this as a safety measure. And for those of you that don't know what the situation that has been, I believe most of you, I'm very fortunate and thankful here with Drag Illustrated that we have a hardcore following. I never have to explain what something is to our audience here, because the people that my brotherhood and brother and sisterhood here, hardcore racers. But for those of you that maybe don't know the nuances, most of these cars for the last decade have been equipped with an RPM activated shifter, an electronic box that when the engine hits a certain RPM, it automatically shifts into the next gear. The NHRA has pointed to this recently as being a potential safety issue, where the car gets out there, shakes the tires into spin, the engine is continuing to accelerate, the throttle is wide open or just left off, but it already hit the already hit the predetermined RPM, shifts into the next gear, wheel speed goes to the moon, and all of a sudden you have a wall banging situation. And I have seen it literally happen dozens of times throughout my life in drag racing, several times in recent history. So I do think there is an argument in the name of safety that can be made there. However, and we've gotten some commentary here, Josh Peak saying hands down it's safer. I do think there is a safety function to this. I can be sold completely on this being a safety measure. However, I consider myself pretty close with like the gang at Fuel Tech, and I know enough about the ins and outs of that software, not just to be dangerous or to be able to have a conversation, but just at Fuel Tech as an example, there are things that can be done if this then that. So for instance, if you don't want the thing to shift into second gear, a parameter could be set that it doesn't shift into second gear unless the throttle's at XYZ percentage. There are ways to accomplish this while using an automatic shifter, and I think that there are some racers that pointed to, hey, there are other ways to achieve this. If you don't want these cars to shift into second gear, we should mandate some technology as something along the lines of a throttle percentage thing that's not going to shift into the next gear unless it's wide open. Right? There's 100 ways to skin a cat, right? There's a lot of different ways to accomplish this, but I do think the NHRA's approach here was this decision was a decision they made primarily in the name of safety. Now, obviously, if you're, again, the inside baseball, if you have your ear to the ground and you're paying attention and you know anybody that's in the know, there are other factors that make these decisions happen. But I can completely understand and, in my opinion, support the NHRA's notion that this is a safer approach. Full disclosure, Advanced Control Devices, ACD, are some of the greatest people that we've ever done business with at Drag Illustrated. And they've actually bought an ad, I think, in every issue we've ever printed. Incredible people. This is not, I get it. I'm a tech guy. I want an Apple Watch and I want the cool stuff and I want, I like technology. But I do think an argument can be made that there's a time and place for it. When I look at NHRA Pro Modified and I think about the men and women that have been a part of this class, I think about Rickie Smith, about Biglet. I think about, now Jason Scruggs is out there, right? Pat Musey, all that, Mike Castellana, Frank, the people that are involved in this, as two-time back-to-back reigning champion Stevie Fast Jackson. When I start to talk about these people and think about them, I see them as an elevated group of people. They're able to do stuff that most are not able to do. And I think that we should embrace the impact this is going to have on the difficulty of driving these cars. I will tell you guys that there's going to be some real issues. And I've actually great commentary right here from Luis De Leon. I love this. There's minimum time RPM throttle to shift, but not every aftermarket, EFI system or engine management system, or in the case of Fuel Tech, like a complete car control system, has that kind of functionality. I just know that technology exists, so I don't want to completely ignore that because I think it's a point someone could make. The safest way to do this, perhaps, as Luis is saying, and I would support, is to make these cars manually shifted. I personally, and I'm injecting some of my personal opinion in this, I think it's exciting to think about someone being able to save a run, short shifting one, pedaling it, plugging it in the next gear, and saving a run and maybe chasing somebody down. I think it's going to add a level of excitement that the class, it's hard to say hasn't been there, but if you're being honest with yourself and you're really trying to analyze this situation unbiased, to be really truly objective, the big moments for the last few years have all been because of jaw-dropping performances. You guys have heard me talk about this ad nausea, right? I'm talking about it all the time. The focus can't be so heavily on the scoreboard. ProMod right now, that's where we're looking. We know the car is probably going to make it at this point in time. The car's probably going to make it. That hasn't always been the case. So most of the time, everybody watches the cars take off. You see it make it through the shake zone and get there to the, and you're looking scoreboard to see if it's going to run a 561 or what, some insane ET. Our focus goes away from the track and goes to the scoreboard. And I think we need to bring those eyes back to the racetrack. And I think making people shift these cars, making racers more involved in the action and the success of these cars, I just don't personally think it can be seen as a negative. I do understand that there are some challenges for each one of these combinations. Obviously, the biggest one is with nitrous. All of these cars are trying to make that 1-2 gear change between 0.9 of a second and 1.2 seconds, right? So that's a pro stock level ask, right? You take an NHRA Pro Stock, the 1-2 gear shift or the 2-3 gear shift, that's made in 7/8 of a second, guys. I mean, as soon as you put it in second, you better be putting it in third if you're going to hit it. And I think that's awesome. It's why people struggle in Pro Stock cars. It's why you get a big money guy that can afford to do whatever he wants, and you throw him in a Pro Stock car, and guess what he typically does? I'm going to leave it open to you guys. Guess what that person typically does? He quits. I'm not joking. That happens more than people realize. I can't tell you how many times a very well-to-do businessman has into a stock, bought a truck, bought a trailer, started buying pit tools, and started getting ready to go pro stock racing, goes to their first preseason test session, and can't make a good run. And I'm not bagging on them, but that's what makes it so awesome. And then they sell all this stuff. And they go do something else. They go boating. Because they wanted to go pro stock race, they wanted to go factory hot rod racing, right? And Churchill Sellers is actually making a very valid point. The person that struggles to do that, they typically go pro mod racing. And I know everybody gets so offended and up on the tire about no one's saying it's easy. There's obviously an insane level of difficulty and complexity to running these cars with any sort of measurable success. However, if you compare the actions required by the two drivers, the driver behind the wheel of an NHRA Pro Stock car or a Mountain Motor Pro Stock car and a latest, greatest, top-of-the-line Pro Mod car, it's dramatically different, right? There's nuances, and a lot of times a Pro Mod driver, it really shows his merit, really proves his worth in times of trouble. I actually saw Alex Lofton make a post on Facebook this morning talking about his past, his history of racing go-karts, and how feeling the car underneath him and being able to make quick decisions and kind of being able to foresee what's about to happen next has really helped him in his drag racing career. And it's probably saved a lot of runs and caused him to pull the chutes and live another many times. And you see Pro Mod drivers really prove themselves in those moments. You know, the last 660 feet when things are moving fast and bad stuff starts to really happen. Guys can prove their worth there. In a Pro Stock car, though, it's literally from the staging lanes forward. I mean, from the time you start the burnout, how much you use the clutch getting into the water box, how much you use the clutch backing up, all these nuances come into play. So I do think adding a degree of that to pro modified drag racing, which I believe to be the final frontier for fast door slammer drag racing. Like if you want to go run the baddest, fastest door cars on the planet Earth, you go run them in the NHRA. And I think that the fact, and you run them quarter mile, and you go out there and you go 560s at 250, 260 miles an hour, and it's as crazy gets in drag racing today. Door slammer drag racing, that is the pinnacle, right? Adding a degree of difficulty to it is something that I find interesting and potentially entertaining. I do see a negative side to this, and I think with so many decisions that are made in racing, it's a double-edged sword. Leading edge or bleeding edge, right? I'll do the Garth Brooks, it's a double-edged sword. Blessing and a curse. If you haven't watched that somewhat awkward Garth Brooks special on Netflix, I encourage you to do so. He sits with a backwards hat on at a chair backwards throughout most of it, doing this. but it's pretty good. Anyways, it's a blessing and a curse here. Manually shifting is going to be a blessing and a curse. The blessing is all the things that we just talked about, right? Some new safety aspects. Let's just lay that out there. Some safety components. We're also going to add, some on-track excitement. I believe we're going to see some guys. We're going to see some big upsets. We're going to see a guy screw up, right? Over rev it, short shift it, whatever the case may be. We're going to see some screw ups. We're going to see some big upsets throughout the course of 2021 based on this, right? The other side of that, the curse of this, will be that there are people that can't do it. And I truly believe that it will impact our inventory of cars. Now, this isn't going as far as saying we're going to make everybody run a clutch, because I think that's going to I think that would be a massive blow to the class that may well not be sustainable, right? I mean, it's because when you go bringing technology like that back, and I'm not saying I'm against it, matter of fact, I may well be for it. My point, sorry, thanks. There was no comparison or analogy, Rex. My point is that I can't remember what I was talking about. Oh, this is COVID popping up. This happens. If you've had COVID, I still have this. A month after the fact, over a month. I'll just completely forget what I was talking about. But anyways, my point is just that the other side of it, if we were to bring clutches back, like I was saying, if we were to bring clutches back, man, you just change it. And you got clutch this, you got someone servicing the clutch after. You have to hire a crew guy because you're going to have to pull the transmission out of it, pull the clutch out of it after every run. I mean, it's a very, very tough deal, right? So that is a whole other thing, but introducing the manual shifter deal, I think it's a happy medium between making the cars legitimately manually shifted with a clutch and where we're at now. The issue, that double-edged sword, the bleeding edge side of that is going to be that there are guys that can't do this. We're going to see some guys going away. We're going to see some guys that are not able to do it. And I personally believe there will be some surprises. I cannot, and I don't mean to wish negativity on anybody or wish, what's the word? I don't want to wish poor results on anyone racing, but I think it's exciting and interesting. We need this sport to be exciting and interesting. We need to have things to talk about. We need scuttlebutt like this, right? And I think it's going to be interesting to see. There are some dudes that won't be able to do this. There are some dudes that have won races, have had considerable success, that will not be able to do this. Mark my words. There will be some guys that it throws a wrench in the gears enough that it throws their program off and they're not able to recover from it. That's my belief. It will run some people out of the class. The nitrous cars, and as I'm sure has been seen, we had a fantastic article on dragillustrated.com. I don't know if any of my crew is in the production part where they could post it into the channel, but that would be fantastic if you could. We had a great Racers Roundtable, a Racers React article that was penned by our own senior editor, Josh Hatchett. He spoke to Stevie Fast Jackson. He spoke to Alex Laughlin, Justin Elks, modern racing super tuner out there in Mooresville, North Carolina. He spoke to Doug Winters. He spoke to Clint Satterfield, and he spoke to Rickie Smith. Painted a really wide swath there, got a lot of differing opinions and input, by and large positive. Rickie Smith, however, was very adamant that this is a step backwards. This is a step in the wrong direction, a step made under the guise of safety, but not at all safety conscious in his opinion. You can read more of what Rickie had to say on dragillustrated.com. And I just as a little sidebar, love him, hate him, or as Rickie used to say, and actually we put on the cover of the magazine, I believe, like it or lump it. No matter how you feel about Rickie, I actually genuinely enjoy and appreciate his willingness to talk. He hardly ever turns down an interview. He is always willing to say a lot and speak his mind. And I think that no matter whether you're a competitor of his or you've had some sort of run with him, because you all know he's a high energy, high emotion guy, he's so good for the sport of drag racing because all of us want big sponsors and everybody wants attention and they want to be on TV, but few people are willing to play the game that Rickie's willing to play. You have to be that guy. You have to be willing to talk about this stuff. Do you have to, maybe lose your mind like Rickie does sometimes? No, but Rickie's a friend of mine and he is a friend to the sport of drag racing. So no matter how you feel about his opinions, it's important that Rickie's so willing to share them, and I wish more racers would do so. But sidebar over, Rickie Smith adamant that this is a death knell for nitrous racing in the quarter mile, nitrous pro mods in the quarter mile. I actually just had a brief text exchange with Dean Marinas, who I intend to dig into this a little bit more. But Chad Green's race-winning, top-tier nitrous pro mod in the NHRA, that car is in low gear for 9/10 to 1.2 seconds, right? So that's you've got to make a move, right? I mean, somebody's got to shift that. That's a big ask, right? And I'm not saying it's impossible, and there are plenty of guys that can do it and have done it. But to do it consistently, to do it day in and day out, enough that you can go race and compete at a high level and compete for a championship, compete for round wins, it's yet to be seen. I know that Dean Marinas, and Pat Musey, they've got their heads together, and they're trying to find a way to maybe keep that car in low gear a little longer, more along the lines of a blower car that's in first gear for 1.8 or almost 2 seconds, right? So it's a much different deal for the blower cars, and I think that's maybe not entirely why, but I believe that's why you see the breaking news that happened last week on dragillustrated.com that Rickie Smith is dropping nitrous and going to elite performance for horsepower in 2020 with a Pro Charger. So it's Luke Robinson is asking, what is the first shift point on a Pro Stock car? It's in that exact same window, 9/10. If you're on the mountain, it's 7 to 9/10. If you're going out there, that's how much ratio they have in those cars on Thunder Mountain out at Sporty Bandamir's Castle on the mountain. Those cars are in for a second. Very, very, very short. So, and that's what, all the Pro Stock guys that I've talked to about this, they're going, absolutely, welcome to the club. Let's get it on. They're loving this because now some other people in one of a very fast-growing, very popular brand of drag racing they're going to get a taste of what's going on in legal pro stock racing. So I think it's a very interesting thing. Obviously, if you go through that article on dragillustrated.com, you'll find by and large people are excited about this. I believe Alex Laughlin. I believe Doug Winters is genuinely excited. Clint Satterfield, another one, and Clint's another guy you can always count on for some gold nuggets and quotes. Clint could make a very valid he can make a very valid argue against the automatic or the manually shifting deal, but he's for it. He understands what's trying to be accomplished, and he's going to figure out a way to try to be successful despite whatever rule changes are made. And that's what racers are typically tasked with, right? It's the NHRA's sandbox. It's the NHRA's rules. So you either, get in line or you get on going somewhere else. And it goes without saying that the NHRA is the highest level of quarter mile drag racing that exists. So if you want to race and you want to race in front of packed grandstands and big crowds and be a part of that whole circus, you're going to have to bend, and you're going to have to adapt this and move forward. I think it's super interesting, and I love seeing all the conversation here. So anybody, please pile in anything you have to think about it. Pat is asking, going to see more TH400 type transmissions or back to the button shifted air shifters for the Lenco? This is one of the big talks of what the NHRA is actually going to see as an acceptable change. I mean, is it going to be a button on the steering wheel, paddle shifters? Are we going to see back to AirPods? Cool. If I had to close my eyes and think of what I wanted it to be, I want one hand on the wheel and the other on a shift tower or a Liberty lever. I think that would be spectacular to see happen. I'm yet to see. I think that's something that we're going to explore at dragillustrated.com over the next couple of weeks as the race season starts to run up on us, which amazingly it is upon us again. It just ended, but it will be a blink of our collective eyes that we will be headed to Orlando to the World Door Slammer Nationals, the SeaTech World Door Slammer Nationals, for the second annual go-round of the biggest door slammer drag race on the planet Earth. And all these guys will have to have these issues such as this sorted out by then. So I'm very, very, very anxious to see what each driver is going to do. And that may be something that we explore on the pages of the magazine. It would be cool to do a feature in the magazine or on dragillustrated.com where we talk, like maybe we go through the points. We'll do number 1, Stevie Jackson, number 2, Brandon Snyder, and go all the way down the rules, all the way down the points finishers and figure out what their exact setup's going to be. Is it going to be a button? Is it going to be a pull cord? I'm joking. A toggle switch. I don't know. Whatever they're going to do. Very, very, very interesting. So Do you think this rule will trickle down to PDRA and RVW cars? Mike, I do not. I look at RVW and I see that as a class and it's outlaw, right? And that's what really this is. There should be a pretty clear distinction between a legal car and an outlaw car. This is the type of stuff, traction control, wheelie control, all these different things that the radial tire cars have. To make them go down the racetrack, and I don't foresee that happening. I appreciate the question, Mike. Francisco Lopez, things are getting all shifty around here, says Al too. Welcome to the party, man. I appreciate it so much. Again, I'll just remind you guys real quick, if you don't mind, we're here at the halfway point of the show. Thank you, first and foremost, for being a part of this. And click like, click share, help us spread this around. We've got to keep the conversation going. I've talked about this for however many episodes of this show we've done, hundreds, maybe over 200 episodes of this show we've done. It's so important that we're talking about drag racing through the week. We all go talk about it on the weekend. Tucci's yelling on the PA, we're talking in the pits and everything in between. But that typically ends on Saturday or Sunday night. It's important that we're talking drag racing and keeping things stirred up and the fires lit Monday through Thursday. It's so important that there is some water cooler space in the sport of drag racing for people to talk about this stuff. And it's very appreciated that you guys participate in this the way that you do every week. I love you all and I appreciate it. So please click like, click share, spread this deal around. A couple of questions I'm going to drill back up. And remember, throw a question in here and we will talk about it. I'll answer anything you want to talk about within reason, probably too much information if you ask the right question. But anyways, I'm going to dive back into a couple of these questions. We had a question from YouTube, and shout out to all of you watching us on YouTube today. Francisco Lopez asked, what are your thoughts on imports racing at the World Door Slammer Nationals? To be honest, man, I couldn't be more excited about it. I'm excited to tap into that fan base. This is something that Ozzy and Maria Moya, Gabby at GRS Motorsports are just so excited about, to bring them and kind of bring these two worlds together. I know how powerful that the import racing world is. I have a ton of respect for it. I'm actually a bit of like an import car fanboy. It's a little known secret, but you put a rotary powered door slammer in front of me or a twin turbo or single turbo Supra and I'm drooling. I love those cars and I'm quite excited about it, man. I think it's going to add what I believe to be some international flair to the World Door Slammer Nationals, the CTEC World Door Slammer Nationals. I'm excited about that aspect of it. I think it's going to bring just something different. Just add an element to the show that I think will be very well received. And the coolest part about it is that we're bringing them in. We're getting the highest level guys. Our hopes are to bring in the baddest 8 pro import cars on the planet Earth, the baddest 8 modified import cars on the planet Earth, bring to be a part of our show. Our hope is to score a couple of wild and crazy match races on Friday and Saturday night between some of our NHRA Pro Stock and Pro Mod cars and those aforementioned import cars and see what happens. We think it'd be a lot of fun, but I encourage you, come out. I appreciate everybody that's reached out. We've had a ton of people hit us up about the import addition to the show, and I'm super excited about it. So thank you for asking. Let me go back up here. I missed a couple. So, real dumb question. Don't most of these guys drive with one hand on the chute? Actually, Kevin Clark, most all these Pro Mod cars are equipped with button-activated chutes. So, I mean, they've got a trans brake button here and a shifter button here. They go through the finish line, or actually, a good driver is going to be hitting those chutes right as they hit the finish line or right before they hit the quarter-mile mark. So they're hitting the chutes. Both hands are on the wheel from the starting line to the finish line in a modern NHRA Pro Mod car. Just so you know. And the same can be said for, well, not for NHRA Pro Stock, but they also use a button on the steering wheel to launch their parachutes. And that's happened a lot of places more and more often. You still see plenty of guys, outlaw 8th mile competitors, no prep cars, etc., that have and they leave starting line. There's several videos. I saw one the other day. Justin Swanstrom posted a run of his in, I believe, big tire, no prep trim at Piedmont Dragway or Mooresville, one or the other. As soon as he lets off the button, one hand on a parachute. That's a very common driving practice. But most of these modern fast door cars have, NHRA legal door cars have a button activated parachute. Ricky Bennett asks, so would the Lenco shifters be out of style? I'd love to see that back again. Unfortunately, Ricky, I think that ship sailed. I don't see a return to that. I would not be totally surprised to see maybe someone run the Tim McCamus style lever style shifter. I don't think that's going to happen. It was something that Jim Halsey was really well known for and celebrated for, something that I always got a kick out of. It was an air shifter, but it still had lightning rods, so to speak. I don't know that we'll see that. I think we're going to see push button stuff primarily. That's my assumption and expectation. But it would be cool to see that come back. Let me see. I'm curious what Billy Stockland's take is on this. Rex, I haven't spoken to Billy about this specifically. I did actually meet one of his trucking company's dump trucks in traffic the other day outside of Austin or San Antonio. And I shot him a text, but we haven't talked about this shifter thing yet. So I'll reach out to him and I'll report back to you, Rex. We'll talk about it next week on the show or maybe on a story on the website. But I don't think, I think that whole camp, Stevie Jackson, Phil Schuler, Billy Stockland, Stevie was very quick to acknowledge that anything that makes it more driver-centric, anything that puts more onus on the driver, he's in support of. So it's, I think that whole team likely feels that way. I know one of their team cars, Jim Whiteley at J&A Service, is very adamant about it and is a huge proponent of these cars being shifted manually. So by and large, man, it's been a 35-minute conversation about this stuff, but it's exciting. I think it's a good thing for the sport of drag racing, and I think it's a much-needed wrench right now. Just that Pro Mod has been going along for quite a while on a kind of similar track. Obviously, last year we had some big shakeups with the addition of the Pro Charger car, which was a big-time news story and maintained that status throughout 2020. But I think it's time for a shakeup. I really do. I think it's time. For a shakeup over there, and this will most assuredly do it. So it'll be exciting to see how things shake out. These test sessions this winter are going to be more fun to watch than perhaps ever. And again, I've said it like 75 times. I'm genuinely excited and interested to see how this works out. There's a lot, again, to unpack with it. A lot of different opinions on this, but it's going to be, in my opinion, long term. I think it's going to be a benefit to the class. It's guys, women, heroes of ours, right? These are the best to ever do it, and I think it's very, very, very important that, I mean, just as an example, Jason Scruggs should be better at cotton farming than I am. He's been cotton farming his whole life. It's his family's legacy is farming, right? I should not be able to just show up, buy the right stuff, and outperform Jason Scruggs on a cotton field. It's not going to happen. And I think that automatic shifters, some of the technology that's come into the class, it has really negated some of the real deal race car drivers out here and their unique individual talents and experience. They should be better at this than the average guy. These are the baddest dudes that exist, the best in the world, and it should be hard. It should be something that not everyone can do. Now, I understand from a rent-a-ride, car lease, program perspective, there's some new challenges because you may have a guy come along that wants to field a car, he's got the resources to do it, but he doesn't have the ability to do it. And that's going to probably be a tough situation. We're probably going to separate some men from the boys out here next year. But it's going to be exciting. It's going to keep everybody talking. And I think by and large, it's going to be a phenomenal thing for drag racing. Oh. Money can't buy talent. That's a for sure fact. Scott Abramson, what's up, buddy? The cars are so unpredictable. Adding shifting will separate the men from the boys. That's exactly right. And I just, Johnny Placino, PDRA Extreme Pro Stock World Champion, shining star in the sport of drag racing, and he's the kind of person, the kind of race car driver that I'm talking about. He's exactly the type of guy that I think he's able to do something that not everybody is, because we could go grab a guy from, most people can't be successful in those cars, in a pro stock car, in an NHRA pro stock car, in a mountain motor pro stock car, because of the nuances, right? So I don't think introducing that to pro modified drag racing is a bad thing. Again, I'm totally open to have an argument or discuss it, but because it's fun as hell to do it. But anyways, let's move on. What else do you guys got for me? I know there was a lot of conversation this week regarding the Rickie Smith news earlier late last week. I'm trying to scroll up here into my notes. Bear with me. Yeah, this was a huge news story No doubt about it. Rickie Smith dropping the nitrous combination. He has been threatening to do this. He has done it once before, made the move to a turbo car. At one time was teamed up with the Proline Racing Camp and returned to his roots with the nitrous combination, had considerable success and always has had. But I think everybody is looking at the ProCharger combination right now as just it's rapidly refining. It's being rapidly refined. It is massively powerful, makes big power, big reliability, and it's going to be interesting to see how many more guys, because look at Carl Stevens. This isn't being talked about as much as I thought it would be. This is a guy that was one of the pioneering turbo guys. This was a guy that was a turbo dude through and through, whether it was in PRA Pro Extreme, whether it was in, overseas, whether it was in the NHRA, he's a turbo guy, whether it was in Midwest Pro Mod with Turbo Todd Moyer, all the different teams, he's always been a turbo guy. The news breaking that he's switching to a ProCharger, that's huge, right? And I think we're going to see more and more and more of that. And honestly, I think the NHRA is now tasked with saving the turbo combination. Right now, there's one. Chris Thorne, right? There's one turbo car right now. Steve Matusik, I think it's up into the air as to whether or not he's going to, return to pro modified racing on a full-time basis. So there's no telling who's going to be driving the bus and pushing forward on that turbo combination, and it's going to be weird to see because you rewind the clock 2-3 years ago, and the common belief was that if you wanted to race and be successful in NHRA Pro Mod, you needed a twin turbo Hemi with an automatic, with a 400 turbo and a converter. So nothing could be further from the truth here in 2020, at the end of 2020, headed into 2021. I'm very interested to see if the NHRA does anything to bring a little bit of life back to those cars. The problem is, if they don't do it soon, and they may well have already missed the bus, all that stuff's going to be converted to turbos, and we're never going to see anybody return, right? Because the tough part about turbo cars is, for all the performance and all the power and all the seemingly limitless performance potential of those cars, they are a nightmare to tune. You can talk to any power management guru in the sport of drag racing, and they'll all tell you the same thing. It takes a borderline mad scientist to keep one of those cars performing consistently. So will anybody go from ProCharger back to turbos? I doubt it. I don't think that's happening. So I think the NHRA needs to step in and make a move before they lose any potential of having those cars in the fold and a part of the class on a regular basis. Because, man, if you think about 2 or 3 years ago there being no turbo cars or one, holy cow! I mean, that's just such a crazy deal. It's hard to even fathom. But here we are, right? Here we are. And I do think it's interesting to note, as just a little bit of a sidebar, that from my understanding on the Rickie Smith deal, he's still operating as an independent team. He is a guy that likes to go at his own way. His relationship with Elite Motorsports and Elite Performance is primarily in horsepower. So it's the same as, Rickie Smith was a notorious Pat Musey Racing Engines customer, and he's now going to buy engines from Elite Performance. So that's primarily what it is. I think a lot of people immediately assume that now that's like a 3-car team and Rickie's driving a car for Elite Motorsports. It's not necessarily the case. I've dug in on this quite a little bit, and it's going to be, Rickie continuing to do what Rickie Smith does and run a top program, but he's going to do it with a ProCharger, ProCharged Hemi from Elite Performance. So. Annette Summer in the house. What's going on, sweetheart? I've been dreaming of this day since the gizmos were allowed. It's pretty cool. Anxious to hear your take, if you would be so kind as to throw it into the comment, what you think the actual mechanism will be. Will it be a button? Will it be air? What do you think we're going to see be the common setup? I'm very interested to see that. Steve Gonzalez, I guess turbo isn't all the rage after all. It's crazy, man, because this is something that I can talk about a lot. In fast door slammer racing, I've never really been a turbo guy. I've been impressed by it. I was super enamored with it in the Brad Personette, Steve Matusik days. Liberties, clutches, 5-6 foot flames hanging out of them, sound like a Saturday night in Harlem. I just loved that. Pop, 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 pop. Just awesome. Nothing better. The more refined that combination became, the less it intrigued me, right? And It's no doubt some of the most some of the most impressive performances that I've ever seen on the drag strip have come from a twin turbo race car, right? Incredible power, incredible technology, and it's been so fun to see it develop. When I think of turbos, to be honest, and where I really think their sweet spot is, it's in street high performance applications. I mean, the fact that you can put a turbo or a couple of turbos on a pretty mild LS engine with a really mild cam in it, or a Coyote motor. I mean, you can make so much power with them and have them make basically no impact on the drivability of the car. That's hard to top, right? That to me, that's really where turbos shine. That's been, I think, the coolest part of the whole deal. But there's been several people talk about how I remember Pat Musey when turbos were just kind of on the cusp of showing up on a regular basis in a Pro Mod. I was on the phone with Pat Musey, who is he's just another guy that's so willing to flip the switch, put on his Popeye hat, and start giving you badass quotes and insight and stuff that you can tell he's kind of having to turn on Pat the racer, Pat the personality. And it doesn't take much for him to do it. I love talking to Pat on the phone and hanging out with him. And he was quick to tell me that wherever turbos go, they ruin everything. That was his opinion. I have a similar opinion about screw blowers. Big power, super cool, but most everywhere they go, they screw everything up, right? And he was adamant that if they let turbos into the class, back however long ago that was, right around that same time with the automatic shifters that we were talking about at the beginning of the show, that they would become the dominant combination, no question about it. And he was right. They became the dominant combination. Didn't win every race necessarily, but always were leading the charge. Troy Coughlin wins some championships, tons of records set. Really all out of that Pro Line Racing Camp at Ball Ground, Georgia. And they worked extremely hard to refine that combination, and it was kind of tough to see them just perpetually hammered for the success they were having. But resourceful they are. They go out and they develop a different program. They develop this Pro Charger program, and here they are once again with a front-running operation, a front-running engine operation, and by all accounts, they're moving into the roots-blown combination as well. They will have some roots-blown cars in the future. They have already done some testing. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. I know that Elite Performance up there in Wynnewood, Oklahoma, they are doing their research, doing their homework on the roots blower. So it's Pro Mod is just, I think it's an exciting part of the sport of drag racing. It has a lot of interest, a lot of fan following, lots of places to run these cars, which I honestly think has driven the bus for it for so long, is that those cars are so versatile. I mean, you can, if you so chose, you could put those on, go for big money down in Valdosta, Georgia, or in Orlando. You can set them up for 8th mile competition and run with the Midwest Pro Mod Series or the Midwest Drag Racing Series, Keith Haney's camp. You can go run NMCA Extreme Pro Mod. I mean, there's just so many Northeast Outlaw Pro Mods with our buddy John Mazzarana, Carolina Extreme Pro Mod Series. Obviously, I'm leaving a lot of stuff out, and I don't mean to, but I'm just saying you can go build a Pro Mod car that will fit the NHRA, and you can race that car a lot of places. And that's my personal opinion as to why that category of drag racing continues to grow like it does. You can just race them a lot. You can race them a lot. Hopefully, Kyle Lang says burn downs will be more of a thing now that people have to concentrate on shifting. I don't know that it'll affect burn downs or starting line rituals much. Maybe a little. I think you're going to see some more like double bulbing accidentally, just people being a little scattered or kind of running through their mental Rolodex of what they need to do to be successful. I don't know if we'll necessarily see burn downs. Perhaps. I think what we're going to see though is just, and let me backtrack on that a little bit. I think it's going to make any difference, but I do think that there's going to be more effort to rattle people. That's going to be more of a valid option. Taking your time staging, taking your time setting the wheelie bars. There's going to be more people rushing, trying to rush a guy. I think we are going to see, to your point, some increased gamesmanship, quite possibly. Some increased gamesmanship in the sport of door slammer drag racing, pro modified drag racing specifically. But I don't know technically, like as far as the mechanics of the car are concerned, it's going to have that much of an impact. Monday Morning Racer. I've never been a turbo fan. Glad for the diversity in power outers, but not a fan. I can remember Billy Glidden crushing the turbo guys in his black Fox body Mustang, man. We were actually, earlier this week, I spent some time with my buddy Tommy Kundrick from Mickey Thompson Tires, longtime supporter of Drag Illustrated, a dear, dear friend of mine, and we actually spent several hours talking about Billy Glidden and the impact that he had on drag racing wherever he went, whether it was ADRL, Extreme 10.5, Fun Ford, all the different Ford series that he participated in, Pro Stock, Pro Mod recently. He's always been a lightning rod wherever he went. And to what to the point I was making about Rickie Smith, Pat Musey here earlier, thank God for guys like that. I know that they may wear on the nerves of some of the hardcores and some of their fellow racers, but for the sport to grow and there to be fanfare and there to be people lined up for autographs and sign or buy your t-shirts and to care about what you do, man, it's important that everybody be willing to kind of stick their neck out there and be themselves a little bit, say what they think. And I appreciate guys like Billy Glidden who would always put themselves out there. Yeah, Aaron Van Heel, my buddy from Minnesota. What's up, Intercomp Racing? Billy Glidden dominated in so many places. It was absolutely insane. And I honestly think, given the opportunity, he could have had true big-time success. And he did have measurable, considerable success in NHRA Pro Mod when thoroughly outgunned. Smallest engine, lower budget, older car. He was always able to outrun some of the wallets and some of the spending that was going on in drag racing and Pro Mod drag racing just with ability, tuning experience. Incredible racer. I want to go back to Benny Wilmoth. Why does Drag Illustrated seem never talk or help out the small tire promoters? Hey, but we actually support small tire drag racing in every possible way that we can. Matter of fact, this magazine started catering almost exclusively to small tire drag racing. We were deeply, deeply involved with the Outlaw Racing Streetcar Association, ORSCA. Most of the small tire drag racing that I'm aware of, most of the big name small tire racers that exist on the planet have either been on the cover of Drag Illustrated or featured throughout the magazine. I will admit there's so much like small tire no prep or small tire 2810 deals out on the East Coast that we can't follow all of that stuff, and there's certainly always room for improvement across the board with everything we do, but I appreciate your input. We'll put it in the old think tank up here, and we will work hard to make sure that those guys don't feel left out. We certainly don't intend to leave them out. I had, says Annette Summers, the Tim McAmis air levers when I quit, and I love that. Turbos with a clutch will work. After I had to quit, Stevie drove my 57 with a setup, no problem, until the rear end broke 3 times in a row, 970, 60 foot with a clutch with the first timer behind the wheel. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. I, too, believe that all these combinations, no problem, Benny. Appreciate it, and I appreciate you going drag racing and supporting our sport, and it's our absolute pleasure to talk about drag racing and to try to spread the good word of this sport to everybody that will have it. I was trying to go back up to what that was saying. I, too, believe that these cars could be successful with a clutch. I think it would be cool. I just do personally believe that ship has largely sailed. I think that ship has largely sailed in NHRA Pro Modified. Just there. That's what I'm talking about specifically. It's a big transition to try to go back. And what's interesting, and I never, ever thought about this, but this is a fun thing to think about. Stevie Fast Jackson's never raced a car with a clutch in it. Jason Harris, this is a guy that is one of the most celebrated and successful 8th mile door slammer racers of all time. He damn near went undefeated in PDRA Pro Nitrous competition. He won the Piedmont Big Dog Shootout Series this year, the Championship Points Series. Very, very, very successful racer. Never ran a clutch. His dad, Bob Harris, probably only ran a clutch. It's a generational thing. And we're in a generation of drag racing right now where a ton of these guys that are heroes of ours have never worked on a clutch, have never raced with a clutch. So I just don't know that we're going to be able to press rewind that long. I would not be against it, but I just think that instead of skipping back 15 seconds, like we're doing right now, because this is what, in my opinion, what we're doing right now. In business, I actually had a conversation the other day that sometimes you can't go forward without going back a little bit, right? A lot of times in business, if you're going to make a big push, you're going to have to take a couple steps back, survey the field, maybe do a couple of things twice, a little bit of duplicity, a little bit of do-overs, whatever the case may be. You're likely going to have to take a step backwards so that you can prepare yourself to really step forward. I think that that's what we're doing right now in NHRA Pro Mod. We're hitting that skip back 15 seconds. Just if you remember your VHS or your cassette tape, we're just going back like 15 seconds. Asking guys to put clutches in these cars is like holding the button down for a few minutes. It really is. I mean, it's beyond the scope. Most of these guys have never raced those cars, have never run these cars with a clutch. I just don't think it's going to happen. Plus, time between rounds is shorter than perhaps ever. You get on a live TV day at an NHRA national event and you get into Sunday afternoon, you get past the first round, you better score because Cowboy or somebody's going to be out front clapping, honking, blowing a whistle, something trying to get you to the lanes. And to add that into the mix, now these guys are going to have a full-time guy that goes to service the clutch, or maybe two, or it's going to be an additional responsibility for somebody. I just don't know that it's a realistic, feasible thing. Probably not. I do think it's super interesting, fun to talk about making everybody run a clutch, but I don't see it happen. I do think it would be considerably cool to maybe make everybody leave off their foot, though, because you could do that. You could have the trans brake button run off a clutch switch or off of a pedal. I think that might be kind of cool, but I don't know that it's necessary. I'm just saying, if we're throwing out that type of stuff, that's a consideration that I would have. But it's interesting and it's weird, guys, because I mean, this is hard for me to say out loud, but we're getting older. I mean, it's the days of when I was growing up watching Pro Mod racing. Vincent Badano Jr. is saying that he can turn one around in 20, 25 minutes. I don't know that you are. I know that you're not. You may be the exception to the rule. I'm not saying there aren't lots of guys that can do that, but I tell you, you go have a conversation with some of these dudes and you start talking to them about cutting clutch discs, every run, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and you get a lot of deer in the headlights looks. Let's move on to the next question. Merlin XPV watching on YouTube. Appreciate all of our YouTube watchers. Automation has undermined the sport. It really has proven itself as demonstrated in motorcycle drag racing. It's tough to argue that. I mean, I think it's tough to argue that. It depends on what your barometer is or what you're measuring. Like if you're measuring like the way the cars run, if you open to the back couple pages of Drag Illustrated and you go through Brett Kepner's top 8 list back there, those runs and those numbers that are on those lists, which I believe to be some of the coolest information available in the sport of drag racing. If you're not familiar with it, log on to dragillustrated.com, click the cover of the magazine, paddle through those bad boys toward the end of the magazine, and you'll see a 2-page spread, which I believe to be the most incredible collection of race performance numbers and performance mark that exist in the sport, compiled by legendary drag racing historian Brett Kepner. Those runs are made possible by technology. The cars have improved so much, the tires have improved so much, the ignition systems, the engine management systems, the power levels, the reliability, all those things. It's been fantastic what technology has done for our sport in terms of performance. But again, as Garth Brooks would tell you, it's a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing and a curse. And that's always going to be the case, right? I think I hear people talk all the time about the NFL. I admittedly am not a huge stick and ball sports fan. I recently have become a little more invested in the NFL. I've been an NBA fan a while, but there are still people, I can't tell you the number of times that I've had people tell me that, I don't watch the NBA anymore. It ain't like basketball was in the early 90s or the late 80s. Or I don't watch the NFL anymore. Hell, they can't even tackle each other. Everything's a penalty. So that's just part of life. I think that there's always going to be that. Like personally, I love watching drag racing. I love watching the NBA. I love watching the NFL. And I'm not going to labor over the fact that I'm not going to see the train collisions or whatever that we used to see quite frequently, or somebody get their spine broke or whatever out on the field. That's not the only reason I'm watching, right? And I think the same can be said for drag racing. Sure, everybody talks about the golden days, or, Brett Kepner, another Brett Kepner-ism, he calls it glory dayitis, and it's really true and really funny because we all kind of look at the past with rose-colored glasses and not maybe are thankful for what's right in front of us. Because I would argue drag racing is as exciting and interesting as it has ever been right now. It's fantastic, and this is a move in the right direction. So, anyways, it's interesting. I can definitely make a case for technology in the sport in a lot of ways, but we have plenty of issues. Gordon Smith with a question here. Wes, are you sick of seeing the racing in small tire totally relying on track prep instead of it used to be with Orska back in the early days? Chase, I just think that Garth Brooks thing is so funny. Like, it's just the whole thing. It just made me laugh so much. I guarantee you he cut that like 50 times. Like, hold on, let me move my hands a little different. I want to say it a little more dramatically. I couldn't help but watch it. I don't know if I just had enough wine that I was being kind of critical, but I was watching it late at night, and I'm like, oh my God, this seems over the top. Anyways, going back to Gordon Smith's question about track prep, Brian Loans penned a manifesto on bangshift.com, very well-known Fox Sports personality, Motor Trend TV personality, longtime NHRA announcer, and outlaw drag racing announcer, all-round drag racing announcer, penned a really incredibly interesting article on bangshift.com. I was actually fortunate enough for him to send that to me last week. He said he'd send it to a lot of people in the industry, not a lot of people, but some people that he wanted to get some input from, and I had eyes on that last week, and I think it's a great read. If you haven't read it, if somebody would be so kind as to throw a link, I'm sure it's one of the top stories on bangshift.com. If you check it out, someone grab the link and throw it into the comments here. But yeah, I think track prep it's tough because I have plenty of friends outside of racing that operate in the track prep world. I think a lot of Tyler Crossnow, Jimmy Bradshaw, the Traction Twins out in Colorado, Cale and Cody Chris. There are tons of people that I have a lot of respect for and consider friends outside of racing that are involved in that part of the sport. Dave Cook, I mean, there's a lot of them, right? But I do think that the expectation, thank you, Aaron Van Heel, I do think the expectation has become unsustainable. And I do think it detracts. I personally don't think drag racing is prepping the track to perfection, running two cars, prepping the track to perfection, running two cars, prepping the track to perfection, two cars. I don't think that's a great show. I admit that it has produced some incredible performances. And I'm not saying that we need to go all in no prep racing. I'm not saying prep needs to be thrown to the side altogether. Definitely don't think that. But I think there's a happy medium, and we've gotten way over center. And I think that if the show is important, the production of the show and the speed and get the tractor off the racetrack. I'm so tired of seeing four-wheelers with spray tanks behind them. It's a point of pride for everybody. This is no shit or no crap. We just went through myself, Nate Van Wagenen, the editor-in-chief at Drag Illustrated Magazine, Josh Hatchett, senior editor at Drag Illustrated Magazine. We spent an entire day going through all of our photo annual submissions for the Drag Illustrated Photo Annual. It's one of the most celebrated issues that we do. It's a crowning achievement for a lot of drag racing photographers. It's something that our subscribers look forward to every year. And it's a ton of fun for us because we kind of just get to reminisce about the entire season through photos. It's a ton of fun. It's a great looking issue. Mike Carpenter, our art director at Drag Illustrated Magazine, a little quick shout out to Mike's dad, Charles Carpenter, as he recovers from a very, very, very serious stroke out there in Charlotte, North Carolina. We're thinking about you guys and love you very, very much. But Mike does an incredible job laying out the magazine. And every year when I get the photo annual, I have to go, man, did we do this? Did we do this? Did we do this? This is insane. Anyways, this year, we had several hundreds of photos submitted for the photo annual. Shout out to all of our photographers that sent stuff over. Love you guys, really appreciate it. Going through these photos, I kid you not, there was probably, I would ask that Nate or Josh chime in here, but I would say there was 10, maybe 20 pictures of John Deere tractors and Polaris ATVs with spray tanks behind them. As if it's a cool drag racing photo. And I'm not bagging on the photographers that sent it. I'm using this as an example. Okay, so easy. Slow your fingers down. Don't send me a hate text just yet. But isn't that insane? We ask for photo annual submissions, and you don't send a wheel stand in 57 Chevy or a funny car burning to the ground or a family packing the parachutes in the pits. You send a picture of somebody driving down the track on a tractor. You send a photo of somebody flying down the track with a sprayer. If that doesn't tell you how prevalent that has become in our sport, it's insane to me. And again, I'm not trying to upset anybody or take shots, but it is, if you really think about some of the complaints we hear from fans, some of the complaints we hear from sponsors, that too much downtime, not enough action, why do they keep getting that tractor out? That's so hard to explain, and it's extremely hard to overcome from a promoting standpoint, right? Like, holy crap. I feel there should be a happy medium. And I always thought that it would be cool if in drag racing there was a way that we could just identify a standard. The track needs to be this. In direct sunlight, low cloud cover condition, at this temperature range, the track should be this at the starting line, at 60 foot, at 300 feet, at 600, I don't know. That's probably pretty complicated, but it just seems like there should be a way to try to get the track within the acceptable window and then let them go, right? Is that impossible? Maybe it is. I see guys real smart out here in the sport of drag racing, really smart, rocket scientists smart. And I just can't wrap my head around that we're not able to identify some sort of standard, some sort of window of acceptability that it's like your credit score. If your credit's between, 650 and whatever, you're getting the loan. 800, you know what I'm saying? If it's below that, we got a problem. We're probably going to have to talk about it. You know what I mean? If it's way below that, you probably should not be in the bank, right? I wonder if there's just a threshold that we could find, like on a track meter, that would be acceptable. The track's good. Because the expectation has become that the track needs to be great all the time. And that is, I think it's detracted from our show, and it has only furthered, only intensified the focus on performance. If you want to go land speed racing, there are opportunities for that. There's the Texas Mile, there's the Bonneville Salt Flats. I mean, there are places to do this. There's the East Coast Timing Association. There are places to go as fast as you can. There's places to do that. But I don't know that it should be the focal point of our sport the way that it has become. I've seen this time again, and I remember hating this for, I think it was Donald Young. He had his race. His race has always been spring and fall, right? I remember he would have his race in October, and it seemed like there was just an immediate push to have all these other smaller events so that the records could be set there. And there would be this notion that, like, No Mercy was less significant because the record wasn't set there. I mean, if you remember, there have been times it's been quite hot during that event. I remember when Jeff Nizer won a couple of years ago, I was actually super excited about that because it wasn't the fastest car on the property that won. It was the best racer that weekend that won. Jeff Nizer was the best dude that day, made the best decisions in very tricky conditions, and he won the race, and he should be celebrated for it, and he should be a hero because of it, right? But it's as if a race, if it didn't happen, didn't exist, if there wasn't some crazy record set at it. And that's just it's a real conundrum for the sport of drag racing because we're setting a precedent that you have to set a record or whatever for an event to be relevant or to be meaningful or whatever, and I think it's problematic. But that's a little bit of a tangent. I can't really take it back at this point, but Churchill Sellers is kind of nailing it right here in my opinion. He was breaking records and or beating records from other sports and parts of drag racing. So my question is this. If the record's all that matters, why bother with competition? And I am not convinced, and I wrote an article on dragillustrated.com about this, my opinion that we are going to, what Jason Miller did with the Hail Mary Derby at Maryland International Raceway a few weeks ago, that will be a model moving forward. That will be a model moving forward. There will be events, I believe, and I may put one on. I'm talking about it right now. I kind of want to do it. But literally, as recently as a couple of months ago, Jason Miller proved that this is a valid concept to just prep the track to the nines, give everybody 4 hits a day to go set their personal best, to go set their records. That's what so many people want to do anyways. Like, I can't count the number of times I've heard a racer tell me that they lost in the first round, broke out by 3/10, but they ran their best pass ever. Screw it. You know, that's so great. I mean, if that's what you're after, let's give people a place to do that. Take note of the fact that Chris Graves, this is phenomenal, is actually putting on an event next spring to try to set the A Fuel quarter-mile record. They're going to make like 3 attempts a day for 2 days. I mean, this is becoming a thing. And I just wonder if that wouldn't, if that's what they do, why not just run the race in the middle of the night when it's cold or when the air is as good as it possibly can be, and just go out and set records. Like, let's just do that. Don't get it skewed. Don't try to do both. Because when you try to do both, you take away from the racing. You take away from the competition aspect. If it's going to be nothing but a home run derby, Hail Marys only, let's go set our career best. Let's go set the best run ever for this particular combination or whatever. Just go do that. And I think that's okay. But I think they're different things. And I think that we continually try to merge them. And there have been moments where it's been successful, but I think it, as a whole, it is not successful. I mean, look at what's going on in the NHRA. I mean, their show's tighter than it's ever been, more concise than it's ever been. Let's move these things along. Let's run these things. Let's get this deal over with. You know, and it's not because we don't want it to last and we don't enjoy watching it, but man, it's in 2020 and it's only going to get worse in 21, 22, 23, and so on. Keeping someone's attention for days at a time or weekends at a time is tough. Let's have a race. Let's get it over with. Okay, guys, I am almost done. I'm going to scroll back up to a couple more questions here. I just look at it once, how it was so much better. Boom, 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 boom. And I hope everybody understands that nothing I've just said is intended to take away from the incredible racing that's going on in the country and around the world right now. But I do think that we've gone over center with track prep, and we need to pull back, much like drag racers are being forced to do in the NHRA Pro Mod division right now. There's nothing wrong with hitting that rewind button. I'm not saying we need to rewind it for 5 years. I'm not saying we need to close our eyes and hold it down, but we probably need to hop back. Let's just skip back a little bit. Skip back 15 seconds, just like you do on a live stream. Skip back 15 seconds, skip back 15 seconds, skip back. Oh, there it is. That's the way I liked it. Let's just do that a couple times when it comes to track prep. And I think it will have an overall good impact on the sport of drag racing. Justin Yaw asks, what about NHRA emailing the top alcohol funny car guys about bringing in A Fuel cars? Does it help with their car count? Personally, I don't think it does. I think that it's going to create some internet fodder. There will probably be a couple of guys try something if the opportunity existed. But I definitely don't see that being like, that's not the answer, in my opinion. I don't think that's the answer. I think treat them better, pay them more, park them better. That's how you improve turnout in those classes. Not introducing new combinations. I don't really think that's the answer. If you're going to introduce a combination, you need to introduce something where there's a huge inventory of cars. The NHRA had the opportunity to do this with Pro Mod last year when they allowed in the big inch nitrous cars, the 960 plus inch nitrous cars. There was a huge inventory of these cars around the country, but specifically on the East Coast, right? All of those PDRA Pro nitrous racers who more than likely are not going to quit racing PDRA because PDRA is a great place to race, especially for like the business owning racer, right? That doesn't want to deal with the intricacies, the time commitment of the National Hot Rod Association, right? PDRA is a perfect spot for so many racers. However, there are a slew of those like PDRA Pro Nitrous guys or PDRA Pro Boost guys that would definitely go to ZMAX if they could. right? Didn't have to change their car much. They go to one NHRA race a year, or maybe a couple, or go to the first one and dabble in a couple of others. Unfortunately, the NHRA, and I think their initial thought was good, like, hey man, we're going to go after this group of cars and we're going to bring them in. Unfortunately, they followed that up with a bunch of safety rules and a bunch of other stuff, which that's a separate argument, a separate discussion. I'm not saying right, wrong, or anything right now, but they made the barrier to entry, I would say, largely insurmountable, right? All of a sudden, instead of being able to just go race NHRA, buy a tech card, you got to go spend $15,000, $20,000 at your local chassis shop getting your car legal to run NHRA Pro Mod. There are plenty of people that would argue if you can't afford to do that, you shouldn't be doing this stuff anyways. But that's a big ask in a short amount of time, so that they kind of shot themselves in the foot on that deal, in my opinion, if they were looking for car count. Same can be said for top alcohol funny car. Like if you're trying to increase car count, a new combination that no one has really run or consistent runs right now, that's not the place to do it. If you're going to increase car count in top alcohol funny car, in top alcohol dragster, you're probably going to need to take a cue from Keith Haney. And you're going to need to pay those guys better money. You're going to need to treat them better. You need to park them better. There's a lot, and I guarantee you if you walk through those pits and get dusty and dirty like all those top alcohol racers have to every weekend because they're parked in gravel or mud or dirt, you could probably learn a lot about what they want by asking them, And what I would say, the big takeaway from me on that email, Justin Yaw, from the NHRA, I'm going to actually put your question up on the screen so I can not lose sight of it here. What that email really told me, or what it really means or represents, is positive, is very positive. While I don't think injected nitro funny cars are the answer is definitely in asking these racers what they want, what they need more of. This is a very common function in businesses where you do a needs analysis. You go through and you ask questions of your customers to find out what they need. And I applaud the NHRA for making that reach out, starting that communication. I don't know what kind of feedback they got or what happened, but that is definitely how you get to an answer, is ask some questions, right? Ask some questions, learn something, gain some insight, and go from there. So kudos to the NHRA for reaching out to the top alcohol racers. I'm just not totally sold on this, injected nitro funny cars. Okay, where's the message about DJ Cox? I didn't see it. Someone will have to share it. I didn't see it. Why is there no factory involvement from other manufacturers? Last question for the day, guys. I appreciate it very much. Thank you guys all so much for being a part of this. I'm going to throw this on here. Why is there no factory involvement for other manufacturers in Pro Stock? Even when I pay for NHRA TV, I tend to skip over the Pro Stock segment because I don't want to see a bunch of Chevys race. I'm from the Bob Glidden, Lee Shepard, Warren Johnson, Roy Hill, Darrell Alderman days when you had diversity in the class. What can be done to bring that level of excitement back to the class? My honest to God opinion is that it's there right now. I understand and completely accept what you're saying about the lack of diversity of engine combinations, right? Completely accept that. However, the proof is in the pudding, and if you look at the back and forth battle that existed this year between Greg Anderson and Jason Line and Erica Enders and Jed Coughlin, and the drama at the end of the season, and Christian Quadra taking out Jason Line on a hole shot in the first round of the last race of the season, I've got goosebumps. Those are real. I mean, it was ridiculous. I don't know. If you can ask for more than that, I mean, you should know that you're asking a lot. Because despite the fact we don't have a Ford versus a Chevy necessarily, or a Mopar out there, the men and women involved, in my opinion, have done a great job of keeping it pretty damn interesting. And I don't necessarily need, that's like cherry on the sundae. If it so happens that we've got, Pro Mod's an easy example. Well, no. Like, look at Pro Stock. I'm just going to labor on this. We had the Summit team versus the Jegs team. We had a girl versus a guy. We had the older legend versus the younger legend. I mean, I I just don't know what more you can ask for. It's like a red car versus a blue car, quite literally. I mean, it's just all these things are there, all these layers. Would it have been cool if one was a Pontiac and one was a Ford or whatever? Absolutely. But man, we're missing it if we're taking issue with pro stock right now. I get it. I wish there was more of that. But what I like, because there's another side to it. Okay, here we go. Like Garth Brooks, blessing and a curse. Blessing and a curse. The blessing of not having all these different Ford, Chevy, whatever, is that they're all close. They all run close together, right? And there's more guys using the same stuff, so there's more guys that have access to stuff. More engines are being built. Therefore, more of them are being sold used. There's just more gear sets are being bought, so more of them are available used at lesser prices, right? There's a ton of positives to the fact that we have most everybody running relatively like stuff. And I mean, you go to an NHRA Pro Stock race, I mean, you can win from 16. Is it likely? No, but you can. You can win from 16. And I just think that to me is more impactful, because you also got to remember, in the aforementioned Lee Shepard, Bob Glidden, Warren Johnson days, they were crushing everybody. Nobody had a chance. They were head and shoulders better than everybody else. When you're racing those guys, you were racing for second place. So let's not space that, right? Let's not overlook the fact that there are more competitive teams capable of winning a race or going rounds than ever, right? There have been times in the past, late 90s comes to mind, early 2000s Pro Stock, when there was 30, 40 cars, right? But we all knew 25 or so of them didn't have a prayer, really had no business being there. Was it great that they were? Absolutely. But let's not sleep on the fact that there's like 20 plus cars at every race, and almost all of them could qualify number one or win the damn thing. You got to have a little bit of luck and a little bit of sunshine. But I mean, there's an equal number of positives. I mean, when Bob Glidden and Lee Shepard, I mean, they crushed everybody everywhere they went. Crushed them. So I'm actually sold on Pro Stock in 2020. I understand that they're not factory cars, but they haven't been factory cars for 3 decades or something, right? I mean, they've been tube chassis cars for a long time. This is not a revolution. I would honestly say that most of the reason or the onus or the blame or whatever you want to call it for General Motors and Chevy, Ford, Dodge not being more involved in that's something that NHRA has to figure out, because in my opinion, there's no lack of interest. There's no lack of people willing to spend money. There's no reason that situation should exist. It exists because of some bad business, some hard feelings, some things that haven't worked out the way they were supposed to in the past. History has created this situation that exists here today. Because I will tell you that you talk to Ford. I watched an E-Par Trade Ford seminar the other day, and the guy, one of the main guys at Ford, I can't think of his name right now off the top of my head, hashtag COVID, is he spent like a half hour laboring over how important it is to them that they get the opportunity to drag race these electric Ford Mustangs, and how important a competition atmosphere is for them to run those cars. And I don't know. I think there's no reason for the big three and then some. Toyota specifically, which has involvement in drag racing. All these companies have various involvement, but they should have a greater role in drag racing. There's no doubt in my mind. But those are relationships that have either been built up and broken over time, right? And I would love to see legwork on either side done to, it goes back to that needs analysis, having some sort of reach out, having an open dialogue with these people. It's an absolute tragedy that these companies aren't involved with the sport of drag racing in a greater way. Okay, I'm done talking. I've rambled on as long as I possibly can here. A couple of questions. Factory Showdown cars are the new Pro Stocks. Gordon Smith, I think there's a ton of magic in that Factory Showdown class, but it is a complete dumpster fire as well. I mean, as far as the performance and the cars out of, the spending's out of this world, people are going insane with it. There's definitely, don't think there's not a whole slew of issues that exist in that walk of life. Ronnie Wicks asks, are you going to invite Mount Motor Pro Stocks to your event in Orlando? That would be awesome. We are working on it. Right now, as we speak, we are working on those type of things. How about it? Someone, I think John Salemi asked earlier about a rule. There has been discussion for many moons. John Salemi asked a question about whether or not the NHRA was going to institute a weight penalty for late model cars. I'm in full support of that. I do think that we are staring down the barrel of a complete field of late model Camaros in NHRA Pro Mod. We've had these moments before, right? We have heard these things before. We've heard that, oh my God, it's going to be all 63 Corvettes if we're not careful. And then I've heard, it's going to be all, what was the other one that was real popular? All C7 Corvettes, or it's going to be all this, or it's going to be all that. And it's really the case, right? However, I do think we're probably, as the water is deep as it's ever been, as it relates to everybody running the exact same car. So I do think that that's something that the NHRA would be wise to investigate. The problem is in order to make it work, you're going to have to make it significant. I mean, you're going to have to make the weight advantage so significant that you can't not build a 57 Chevy. You can't not build a 41 Willys. You can't not build a Studebaker. Like, you're going to have to make it big and then try to narrow it later. I mean, you're going to have to kind of knowingly go too far, give too much, and then pull back at some point in the future. And you're going to upset some people in the process, because you've got a slew of people out here building late model cars, right? And you don't want to take someone, it's a tough situation. You're going to have to announce that you're going to do this in 2022 and give people plenty of time to wrap their arms around it, make whatever changes they're going to make. So anyways, it's been fantastic talking to you guys. I appreciate it so much. Thank you so much for being a part of this. I hope all of you have a wonderful holiday. I will, I believe, be talking to you next Wednesday, because it's just the 23rd, I think, or something. So we'll be back next Wednesday, same bat time, same bat channel. Support your local racers, support your local racetrack. If you call anybody and buy something from them today, tomorrow, or anytime in the future, tell them Drag Illustrated sent you. We'll talk soon. Thank you, guys.